The woman at the highway rest stop told me my husband was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. I almost laughed because, at that point, Marcus and I had already been arguing for weeks. I was 7 months pregnant, exhausted, and sitting alone in my car with the heater running against the cold November rain. She had tapped gently on my passenger window while I was staring at the road, too tired to decide whether I should drive home or keep going. She looked to be in her 60s, wearing a dark raincoat and holding a paper cup with both hands.
"Don't go back there tonight," she said. I lowered the window only a few inches and asked if she knew me. She shook her head, then glanced toward the ring on my finger. "No, but I know that look." I assumed she was one of those strangers who thought they could understand your life from 5 seconds of observation. I thanked her politely and told her I was fine, even though my hands had been trembling since I left the house. She started walking away, then stopped beside the rear door of my car. "If he makes you feel like you're worth nothing, remember that he doesn't know everything about you." I didn't understand what she meant, and honestly, I didn't want to. At the time, I believed my marriage was falling apart because Marcus had become overwhelmed by his business, and I had become too sensitive to his moods. I drove away after she gave me one last warning that stayed in my mind long after the rest stop disappeared behind me. "Lily, don't sign anything, and don't give up what you built just because he tells you it belongs to him." I remember gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my fingers hurt. My name is Lily Harper, and I had spent almost 2 years keeping one part of my life completely separate from my marriage. Marcus knew I had money. He just didn't know how much. He also didn't know that the luxury company he had spent years trying to build was still alive because of investments made through a private firm bearing my maiden name. That was the part I hadn't told him. Not because I wanted to control him, because I wanted to believe that the man I married loved me without caring about my bank account. For a long time, I thought he did. Then the little things started changing. He stopped asking whether I had eaten. He stopped coming to prenatal appointments. He complained about the cost of everything, even though the company had just secured another major retail contract. Whenever I mentioned the baby, he seemed distracted. Whenever I mentioned the company, he became defensive. I told myself it was stress. That explanation became harder to believe after the night at the rest stop. The following morning, I woke up at a motel 40 miles outside the city. I hadn't slept much. The stranger's words kept returning to me, especially the part about signing something. I checked my email. There was a message from Marcus's attorney that I hadn't noticed the previous evening. It contained a draft agreement concerning my financial interest in several investments. I stared at the screen for nearly a minute. I had never told Marcus about those investments. At least, not directly. I called the attorney. He answered after several rings. "Mr. Harper asked me to prepare the paperwork." "For what?" There was a pause. "Transfer of your interest." I felt something cold move through me. "Transfer to whom?" Another pause. "Your husband." I ended the call. That was the first moment I seriously considered that the woman at the rest stop might not have been imagining things. Still, I didn't accuse Marcus. I drove back toward the city because I needed answers, and because some stubborn part of me still believed there had to be an innocent explanation. That afternoon, I went to the flagship store where Marcus worked. It was located on a crowded downtown avenue, surrounded by glass towers and expensive restaurants. Rain had stopped, but the sidewalks were still wet, reflecting the white lights from the storefront. I walked inside, carrying the small lunch bag I had packed for him. I thought that mattered. I thought showing up peacefully mattered. Marcus was near the private sales area when he saw me. His expression changed immediately. "Why are you here?" "I brought you lunch?" He looked around. Several employees had noticed us. "Lily, not here." I only wanted to talk. Then talk somewhere else. I lowered my voice. "Your attorney contacted me." His face became still. "What did he say?" "That you want me to transfer my investments." He looked away for a second. Then he said, "Those investments don't belong in this marriage." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You knew?" "I knew you had money." "You knew about the company?" His silence answered me. My chest tightened.
I suddenly understood that the argument wasn't about the lunch, the store, or even the paperwork. He had known enough to see me as an asset. I asked him quietly, "Did you ever love me?" He looked embarrassed rather than hurt. "Lily, don't do this here." That sentence broke something inside me. Not because he denied loving me, because he was more worried about being watched. I turned toward the door. He caught my arm. "You're making a scene." I pulled away. Then, in a voice loud enough for the nearest employees to hear, he said, "Just leave." I froze. He pointed toward the entrance. "I don't need this today." I looked at the people around us. Nobody said anything. I walked out. Outside, the cold air hit my face. I stood beneath the store's awning and watched people pass without knowing what had just happened. I wanted to cry. Instead, I called my attorney. "Freeze everything." She understood immediately. "Are you certain?" "Yes." Then I called the investment firm. There was one question I needed answered. How much of Marcus's company do we actually control? The answer came after several seconds. Enough to determine its future. I closed my eyes. For 18 months, I had quietly provided emergency capital whenever Marcus's company was close to missing payroll. I had approved loans through intermediaries. I had covered supplier obligations. I had helped finance the flagship store. I had never taken credit. And now the man who had just thrown me out believed he was entitled to all of it. That night, I went back to the motel instead of our house. For 3 days, I barely spoke to anyone except my lawyers. I cried in the bathroom one night because I didn't want the staff to hear me. I slept badly. I ate almost nothing. For the first time since I had married Marcus, I had no idea what my life was supposed to look like. But grief has a strange way of making quiet things visible. I began reading every document, every transfer, every investment, every payment Marcus had never known about. Then I found something I hadn't expected. A board document from 6 months earlier showed that Marcus had privately discussed replacing me as a beneficiary in a future ownership arrangement. I wasn't going to destroy him. I wasn't going to stand in front of cameras and expose him. I was simply going to stop protecting him. 2 weeks later, the company's board held an emergency meeting. Marcus arrived believing the meeting concerned a financing problem. I was already there. He stopped when he saw me. "Lily?" I didn't answer immediately. The chairman stood beside me and explained that the investment group had exercised its contractual rights after a series of financial breaches. Marcus looked confused. Then the documents were placed in front of him. He read them slowly. His face changed. "You own this?" I shook my head. "No. I invested in it." He stared at the signatures. Then he looked at me. "You could have told me. I tried. You should have trusted me." I almost smiled. I did. That was the hardest part. I had trusted him enough to keep giving without asking for recognition. He had mistaken that trust for weakness. The board removed him from operational control that afternoon. There was no shouting, no dramatic scene, just signatures, silence, and a decision that had been waiting for him long before he realized it. A month later, I moved into a small apartment overlooking the river. I kept the nursery simple. White walls, a wooden crib, one yellow lamp beside the chair. Sometimes I still thought about the woman at the highway rest stop. I never found her. I checked the cameras at the station through a friend, but the footage from that evening was incomplete. Maybe she had simply been observant. Maybe she knew something. Or maybe she had just seen what I was refusing to see in myself. Marcus sent messages for weeks. Some were apologies, some were explanations. One simply said, "I didn't know you were the owner." I never answered that one, because that message finally told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't grieving the marriage. He was grieving the woman he thought he had lost access to. I don't know what will happen between us years from now, We still have a child connecting our lives, and I don't pretend that one board meeting erased everything. But I know this much. The night that stranger warned me not to go back, I thought she was talking about my husband. Now I think she was talking about the version of myself I had been living as his wife. And I'm still learning how to leave her behind.